Hello my friends, I am Lux Noctis and today we're going to discuss female characters in video games. This video is, in a sense, a response to Anita Sarkeesian's positive female characters in video games series. To make it clear before we begin though, I'm not especially pro or anti-feminist. In fact, as a depressed insomniac, my apathy is pretty much limitless, so I don't really care what side of the argument anybody is on, or if someone takes issue with my talking about this, because I'm a straight white guy. All I really care about here is complex, interesting characters regardless of gender, and I can't help but feel like Sarkeesian has missed the mark somewhat with her choices so far. My intention here isn't to launch a personal attack, or to pick apart those videos piece by piece in an attempt to invalidate an individual's opinion. I'll merely be stating a few of the issues I have with that series so far, as a basis for why I feel I have something to add to the discussion. Her first example, the Scythian from Sword and Sorcery, is a character devoid of any personality, a blank slate if you will, which makes the fact that it's a female basically irrelevant. In terms of visual design, the game has a striking art style for sure, and I actually think it looks very interesting. But to be brutally honest, you could tell me this block of pixels was a fridge and I'd believe you. So to think of this hollow, indistinct thing as being an especially positive way to represent females in games seems like a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's abstract enough that it could be either gender, or a particularly decorative buttress, and no one could really argue with it. And honestly, that's it. I don't really have much else to say about the Scythian. The second video, about Jade from Beyond Good and Evil, seemed like a step in the right direction. She is at least rendered in a recognisable fashion. She also has many positive character traits for sure, is seemingly trying to do the right thing, and her aesthetic is pretty unique, which is a plus. Having said that, this whole idea of Jade solving her problems with a camera rather than violence is just inaccurate, since a core part of the gameplay seems to be based around beating down the local wildlife with a stick.
Okay, we just killed some babies. We are terrible people. First we kill the babies, now we kill the parents.
I personally don't see violence as an issue in games provided it's given meaningful context, but nonetheless it's a flaw with the argument being presented. Couple that with the fact that she's a spacefaring acrobat, and she becomes almost entirely unrelatable, since most of us didn't fly to Venus, pull off a side flip and then immediately twat a space wolf this morning. But it's not even the unreality of the setup and abilities that I have a problem with here. It's that Jade falls under the same banner as all the male characters that are ridiculously idealized. I mean, she's literally saving orphans. Nothing could be a more on-the-nose sign of selfless heroism than that. She, along with many game protagonists, regardless of their virtual genitals, falls prey to a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes for interesting story subjects. A practically flawless, relentlessly good hero type is, to put it simply, boring. And it always will be. Without imperfection, there's no depth. So while she is a positive female character, she's not an especially engaging one. I guess that's fine if your only concern is whether someone might see a particular fictional creation as a negative representation of your gender, but in terms of benefiting narrative and having a protagonist worth empathizing with, it doesn't really work in my opinion. Hopefully that should explain well enough for the purpose of this video why I personally happen to disagree with Sarkeesian's picks up to now. So, who do I think stands out as a great example of a female protagonist in gaming? Well, to show you that, we have to turn our attention to one of my favourite games of all time, Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 is a survival horror game developed by Team Silent and released on PS2 and PC in 2003. In more recent memory it was remastered for the 360 and PS3, but that port is horrific in all the wrong ways, with endless bugs and replacement voices so unsuited to the characters that I would actually suggest not playing the game at all if the HD collection is your only option. The installment in question follows protagonist Heather, focus for this here video, on her journey through the titular town. Let's begin purely with her visual design, since that's often the first thing people will criticise when it comes to women in games. Heather's appearance is one of uncommon realism as far as the medium goes. It's too easy to make any and every character overly attractive and athletic looking when it's someone's job to sit down and carefully craft these human approximations. And yes, that includes the male ones too. This is not the case here though. Whilst I'm sure most people wouldn't consider Heather to be an especially unattractive collection of polygons, as weird as that is to say, she's distinctively normal looking, which happens less often in gaming than we might expect. Not only does she avoid the trope of having the appearance of a supermodel, she also has the uncommon honour of her visual design actually correlating well with her in-game situation. She looks to be wearing no makeup, which allows the detail put into the imperfection of her complexion to show, and also enhances her believability as a person, rather than a meticulously crafted puppet. This makes sense in context, because she isn't attending some kind of special occasion. When the game begins, she's just on her way home from something so unimportant I can't even recall a mention of it. Heather was just doing her thing, being a regular human being and whatnot, before her world became a waking nightmare. Her clothing too is appropriate for the situation, garbed as she is in her turtleneck, body warmer, and boots suited to the apparent conditions. At least the ones prior to all the obviously unexpected, nightmarish craziness. The only element of her attire I can see even the most hard-edged of detractors having an issue with is her skirt. Whilst I personally can't understand why this would offend anyone, it becomes even easier to defend when you consider the fact that Heather's character designer initially envisioned her wearing jeans, but a couple of the female members of Team Silent felt a skirt would give her a beneficial touch of femininity. But don't take my word for it, check out this clip from the making of.
But Yuri wasn't the only one thinking about the characters. 2 young women were working with him, and sometimes there was a clash in feminine and masculine thinking, but not in the way you might imagine.
もうちょっと最初はジーパンとかそういうのをジーンズを履いたりしていたキャラクターなんかを僕なんかを想像してたんですけど、逆にこうちょっと足を露出して見せたりするのもいいんじゃないかとか、そういう意見もあったり。
This is what's known as a compromise, and it's what reasonable people like you and I strive to reach. Alright, now the visual stuff is out of the way, we can finally get to the good part, our protagonist's actual character. Heather is more complex and interesting than the majority of characters in, well, anything to be honest. She clearly loves her dad, but can have a bit of an attitude.
Dad, it's me. Yeah, sorry I didn't call sooner. Yeah, I guess I was. Anyway, I'm coming home now.
Heather, I need to speak with you. My name is Douglas Cartland. I'm a detective.
A detective? Really? Well, nice talking to you.
She also comes across as sincere, shows fear, weakness, and suffers through harrowing events, as well as displaying great mental fortitude and courage.
Listen, I'll take care of the rest. You stay here and I'll be back when it's over. What are you doing?
Maybe killing you here is the only way to end this nightmare.
Yeah, you might be right.
In the simplest terms, Heather is complex. There's nuance, and also rationality to her actions, in spite of her insane predicament. For an example of completely irrational actions used as an incredibly poor plot device, please enjoy this clip of The Walking Dead. My husband has been at a place he said he was going for 10 minutes of screen time. I'm pregnant, so I better go crash this car into a tree. Better check my map on this solitary straight road with no turns on it even. Oh no! Oh no! What an unfortunate series of events for my face and body. Now there's a show where the writers don't know a damn thing about writing females. Or people in general, actually. Anyway, flaws and an intricate personality are what make a great character, and this applies, again, regardless of gender. It even continues to remain true whether your fictional creation is supposed to be good or villainous, charismatic or quiet and reserved. It's pretty much universal. Silent Hill 3's leading lady has these bases covered. But what else makes her great in the starring role? Well, she completely avoids the tropes that are, by some, considered to be prevalent throughout the majority of media we consume. She's no damsel in distress awaiting rescue, and naturally fights her own battles. After all, it's survival horror. The isolation and the reliance on one's own abilities to survive comes with the territory. Heather's also no daring, manly action hero in a female skin either. In fact, not only is she ill-equipped to deal with the bizarre monsters that inhabit the game's twisted reality, but so is everyone else, because Silent Hill has no action heroes. If we were to compare her abilities to those of James Sunderland, her penis-wielding counterpart from Silent Hill 2, it's pretty clear that they're both equally out of their depth, his junk surprisingly offering no tactical advantage. She's not over-sexualized either, and I think it'd be difficult for most to argue otherwise, unless that sweet shoulder or seeing 1/8 of a leg is what rocks their socks. So, to recap, we have an engaging, complicated, trope-avoiding protagonist, one that's easy to empathize with, in part due to her fear, because if this happened to me I too would need a change of undergarments, and also, among other things, due to her vocal delivery. To be frank, I probably could gloss over this, but I really wanted to draw a little attention to it, because it's one of the best things about the game in my eyes. Heather Morris, voice of, well, Heather, provides a great performance that forgoes the Hollywood falsity we often hear in favour of a more raw and real take on the game's dialogue. Just take a look at this part, where she gets defensive about her father.
He's a pretty sneaky guy.
Don't talk about my dad like that!
Sorry. I apologize. Please, calm down.
How do you know my father anyway?
I know everything.
It really is excellent stuff throughout, and makes the character so much more believable. It's a shame the actress isn't better known for her work. Anyway, I'm going to try to wrap this up shortly because, like everything I've ever done, it's gone on way longer than expected. Something I feel it's important to stress though, is that everything I've mentioned up to now in regards to characters applies across the board. It's true that most of what makes a good female character is one and the same with what makes a good character regardless of other factors, whether it be sex, race, or whatever. It seems pretty obvious to say, but a lot of the discussion surrounding this kind of topic seems to suggest that it's less obvious to some than others. There really isn't this huge divide between genders. We're basically all the same. We're all just human beings after all, and I think if more people realised that, there'd be a lot less hostility surrounding these kinds of issues. Before I leave you though, I have one final point, because even with that sobering thought in mind, Heather Mason has one huge advantage that I feel puts her a step above the rest in terms of female characters specifically. And that advantage is that the story being told literally would not work if she were not a woman. I am vehemently against spoilers, and I'm not going to ruin the plot for anyone regardless of how old the game is, so if you haven't played Silent Hill 3 for yourselves, then I strongly suggest that you do so. But until then, you'll just have to take my word for it. Heather's womanhood ties directly into the game's major themes, and is literally integral to the plot. Said plot is a bizarre and unique one, so it's definitely worth your time to experience it. It's just one of the many reasons I consider Silent Hill 3 to be among the best games ever made. Well, that's all I have for you for now. I sincerely hope you found this video interesting and at least somewhat informative. If you decide to stick around, then I'll catch you next time. See ya.